water drain out through the center. I think with that, yeah, absolutely. So this is how you want to rinse the red poppy, holding it by the handles and let the cold water run through the center and drain through the center. Because if you rinse it like this part of the mask is going to end up gray instead of blue. You don't want all your hard work to go to waste. So I think with that, we are ready to go. And everybody who's on the red poppy, if you'll hang tight, we'll be with you momentarily. I'm going to get our Starry Night people started because their mask has a few more steps. So if you're doing the Starry Night mask, we're going to start by using the little tiny rubber bands. And you'll see at the top of your instructions that there is the picture of the Starry Night by Van Gogh. That's right there at the top. Obviously, we can't fit all of those stars in, so I chose to fit in 7. And you can look at your instruction sheet and kind of see how eye space goes, but you can look at that picture and decide where you want your 7 stars to go. The one thing I would warn you is to leave room for those swirls through the center. So be sure to leave room between your stars for those swirls. When you're doing the first rubber band, you're going to just pinch up a little circle of fabric. I always start in that top left corner, and you're going to pull your rubber band through. And I do probably 4 times around it to be able to make sure it stays. Now I'm only going to put 4 rubber bands on here because I'm going to demonstrate how you can use the dropper as well to make the stars. So I'm only going to put 4 of my stars on here. I think I'll do the ones across the top. And we're going to do this part together. So you can just be putting your rubber bands on. And if you've decided to go with the dropper style, you can just hang on for a moment and we'll be right with you.
So Van Gogh painted this after he had a breakdown. If you've heard the story about him cutting his own ear off, this was after that. And that really did happen. It's not a legend. And he was spending some time in a hospital. And he had 2 rooms that were his. One was his studio, one was his bedroom at this hospital. And he was painting from the window of the studio, and the view you see in this painting is the view from his window. He painted it several times during the day and a few times during the night. And it's a little bit different every time. He was moving away from painting simply what he saw to adding in elements that weren't there and trying how it felt to change them out.
All right, so if you've got one of your rubber bands on, at this point, I'm going to demonstrate how you do the rubber band stars. And if you haven't already mixed up your dyes in Red Poppy, friends, you can go ahead and do that as well. Those instructions, it tells you how many droppers of water to add. So you can just pull up, it's usually about that much. It's not necessarily a full dropper of water. But you can just drop those into your cups of dye. Christy, there was something I was supposed to, what was the tip we were supposed to tell them? Oh, in the lid. Okay. So if you happen to have dye in your lid, when you put your water in, you can drop the water into your lid and then pour the lid into your dye cup. I know it's just virtually impossible to get those cups to you without the dye getting in the lids. We try, we really do. And Christy and Luana did a phenomenal job getting these kits ready for everybody. So if you guys happen to see them at the front desk, be sure to thank them for all their hard work on this program. It could not happen without them. And you can probably message into chat to thank Christy. She's here with us tonight. But okay, so we're going to start with the stars. So you get a little bit of yellow. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to use the dropper either way. We're going to get a little bit of yellow in your dropper. And just at the very top, you want to press it to the mask. Wherever you're putting the dye, make sure it's pressed to the mask, the dropper is. Because if you just drop that dye on randomly, it's going to end up all over the other parts of the mask, which you don't want it to do, because then you end up with green when you put the blue over it. So you're just going to kind of go all around your stars, just kind of like that. I don't know if you can see, but just all around the part that you pulled up to be the star. And make sure you get that yellow. Again, you're holding that dropper to the mask to be sure that it's getting on the part of the mask that you want it to get on. And I'll show you what to do if you do end up with a drop of yellow somewhere that you didn't intend as well, because that happened on another mask that I did getting ready for this program. So I'm going to do these four this way. I might have to get a little more yellow in there for this one. Sorry, Vishal. We've got Vishal doing our camera work for us tonight.
I got demoted from the chat from last program.
You weren't demoted. We just had our usual chat person back. So if you're having trouble getting the rubber bands on and that's too difficult, I'm going to show you a different way to put your stars in. And I'm going to do the big star down here in the corner. This is the biggest one. So I should tell you that as well. If you're putting the rubber bands on, I usually pull up a little more fabric in that. On this, I'm going to go just off a little. Remember, it's going to bleed. So I'm going to drop 3 drops in exactly the same spot. And you can see it's just kind of bleeding out and you end up with a circle there. And I actually think that needs to be a little bigger. So I'm going to add a 4th drop right there in the center. And then I'm going to go, let's see, I think I did a 3rd one right here. So I'm going to do another star, a smaller one with just 1 drop right there. I'm going to put another star over here to the right. And I'm going to do a 2-drop star there. And you do want to make sure whatever part of the mask you're using the dropper on is flat, because otherwise you won't end up with a circle. So that is how you do, if you just want a plain yellow star, that's how you do the plain yellow star. If you want to add in the orange, there are 2 different options. You can use the dropper and put 1 tiny drop. What I do is just barely press the dropper to the top of that circle with the orange. I'm not even really squeezing the dropper with the orange. Or you can take your paintbrush later on when the yellow is dry and put just a dot of orange. And I wonder, let me see if I can show you what those 2 differences look like. So this is what it would look like if you use the dropper and you drop a tiny amount of orange while the yellow is still wet on those circles. It doesn't matter if they're the ones that we did just with the dropper or the ones in the rubber band. This is a rubber band circle. That one was a dropper circle. This is if you just choose to put the paintbrush, just a tiny dab of orange with the paintbrush. You may look at that picture and decide you don't want any orange, and that's okay too. You get to choose how your mask looks. So that is stars, the how-to. And we'll leave you guys working on stars. And you can also paint in the moon. Once you take the stars out, you can remove your rubber bands before you do the moon and the dashes around it. I think I'll make this one just with dots. So I'm not going to, well, I guess I do want to demonstrate one for you. Let me do this one in the corner with the orange, just so you can see. If I'm going to use the dropper to put the orange on, I touch it to the, see, I didn't even squeeze it. I just barely touched it to the top of that circle. So you don't want a lot because it'll take over your star. Then let's see. I'm gonna take the rest of these rubber bands out. And you can see you kind of get a little different texture and feel to the ones that are made with the dropper and the ones that are made with the tie-dye technique. So then I'm swapping over to my brush, and I'm gonna paint that moon in just yellow, and remember it bleeds, so you don't want to use a lot at any one time. It requires a lot of strokes to get your dye in there, but that's safer than putting too much and having it end up in a part that you don't want it to end up in. And I'll tell you, this applies to our red poppy people as well. You can refer to that picture to see what direction the dashes are going at any point. And for the red poppy people, it's the strokes. You can see which direction she was painting as well. So for the yellow circle around the moon, I just do tiny dashes, and it's okay if some of them are blobs. I'm just doing, I think I did 3 circles of yellow dashes around it. And keep in mind your star may be in the way, so you just don't put a dash right where that star is. You pick up on the other side of it. I don't know if you can see kind of how I'm doing the dashes, but the second row, I try to go in between the spaces that were left from the last row. And you're using your white spaces between them kind of as a color in itself, because you'll see there's a little bit of white in that painting. So just be sure you've got kind of a circle around it, and then you'll see that the ones in the center of the moon are going in the shape, the crescent shape of the moon itself. So that's kind of, I'm going to leave you with that, working on your stars and your moon. And we're going to move to the red poppy and get our friends on the red poppy started. So we'll just swap over to this other side. And all right, so with the red poppy, hopefully you've got your die all made. And again, if you have any questions at all on any of this, pop it into the chat box. Christy has all of the instructions, and she has helped with this process from the beginning. We're going to use our Q-tips, and we're going to start with the blue dye. Now, I put that picture on your instructions so you could see how much of the blue dye bleeds into your flower and not panic. I will tell you that in using this sky blue dye, the first time I'm going around and dotting the color on, I don't go right up to the edge of the flower, because I want to see how far down it bleeds. So I don't go all the way. So you can see I put it there and it's bleeding out to the lines. So you can come back, and with one that doesn't have quite so much dye on it, you can get a little closer to those lines. But you're just going to tap all the way around the outside of your flower. And I'm going to show you here at the bottom. This is your stem here, so you don't want to do any of your dye there. You're just going on either side of it. Not in this section here, but you will do the band, and you'll see the band is not 100% cotton. So that part you're going to have to put a little more dye on to get it to stay. So you're just going to fill in your dye all the way around the entire mask, and you can go ahead and do your ear loops as well. Those are going to be the blue as well. And then the other thing you can do is to use your paintbrush or your Q-tips, whichever you prefer, to paint the center of your flower yellow. It's already outlined for you, and you're just going to fill in that center section. Go, because we want that to dry while we're painting some of these other parts, because you're going to come back over the top of that with your black dye later on in the program. If thought I would tell you guys too while we're here tonight. If you're wondering how we came up with this idea, we had dye left over from our tie-dye programs. If any of you happen to have attended that, we were trying to come up with something to do with it. And my mother had said to me when we were designing our tie-dye patterns that one of our patterns would be great as a starry night. So I was talking with Christy, who put these kits together. And Christy, weren't you an art history major or something like that? Art history minor. And she came up with the idea to turn this into a program, and helped us come up with a different artists to try. You may notice I'm wearing a failed Monet. It looks like the two water lilies are nostrils. I thought I would wear this to amuse you. I couldn't pick between the two. But I'm going to leave you guys working on the poppy, getting your blue all the way around. That'll take a little while. And again, make sure you go ahead and do the yellow in the center of your flower. And we're going to go back to our Starry Night people. And I'm hoping our Starry Night people are to a point where they're ready to move on to that next part. If you're not ready, let me know. I do want to show you one thing. I said that I would tell you what to do if you ended up with a drop of yellow. You just turn it into another star. If one of your droppers landed somewhere else, it really doesn't matter. These are art inspired. They don't have to be exactly where Van Gogh put them. You just turn it into a new star. So I was going to show you that. And then
You can never have enough stars.
you really can't have enough stars. You're right, B.
Enough to not be able to count them.
Right? So this next part is the hardest part of the Starry Night mask. So I want to talk you through it for just a minute before we actually put dye on our mask. This is where we are going to paint those swirls that are in the painting. You can kind of see it swoops in to the left of those cypress trees and then comes around. And then the tail of that starts from the tip of that, and it's a smaller swirl. So that's what we're going to put in. I invite you to refer to that picture while you're painting your swirls in. I use the sky blue dye first, and I do 3 rows of dashes out of the sky blue dye in the swirl pattern. So that's what I'm going to do here. And you can see it kind of starts up in the corner, so I'm going to have it kind of swoop in. And I do 1 line, and I'm trying to do dashes. You do end up with blobs sometimes, and that's okay. This is not perfect. Again, we're just going to say we're art inspired. And see, I put my stars a little too close together on this one. So I might have to adjust my swirl just a little bit on this one. It might, normally it would have been a little higher on the curve there. I might go back and do a second row up here. And again, I try to kind of alternate those dashes. And you just really want to give the idea of the swirl motion. It doesn't have to look just like Van Gogh's. You're just giving the idea of motion. And you're going to use this particular part, the swirl parts of the mask. You're going to want to leave some white areas because that's a part of that area being lighter. So be sure to leave some white areas in between. Lee, do you have any fun facts for us while we're painting this?
You know, many people say that part of what he was working through as he painted this was his feelings about his recent depression and despondency, maybe thinking about the afterlife, and they put a lot of emphasis on the fact that he used a cypress there. But we know that Van Gogh tended to not use plants or trees for their symbolic features, but simply for their shapes. And so probably he put a cypress in that corner of the painting because he simply liked the way it looked, as the shape of the cypress. The village that he has down in the other corner isn't actually there. Well, it's there. There's a village in the area, but it's not where you can see it from the window he was looking out of. He imagined that village and painted it there in the corner. The brightest star at the bottom of the cypress tree on the right of it is actually the planet Venus, and we know that there was a conjunction of the planets going on at that time, and Venus was extra bright. It was extra close to us at that point. So that's probably why that particular yellow blob is so much larger and brighter than the others in the painting.
I'm going to show you two different things here. You can see on this one, I used this one intentionally because I made several mistakes on this mask. And that was putting my two stars too close together and dropping a blob of yellow right where the second swirl should have been. But you can see I just adjusted it, make it work however you can. This is probably a little more accurate to what you're hopefully working with on your masterpiece mask. But we're going to add in now, if you've done your 3 rows of swirls and you see the tail came down out of that center section and just create a little S, a smaller S. We're going to go back and we're going to add in some dashes sparingly. Don't add as many dashes in the indigo as you did in the sky blue. You're just going to add in a few. And I do always recommend stirring your dye up too before you.
And this is the indigo dye?
This is the indigo
Okay,
dye.
not the
Indigo
blue.
dye, not the sky
Sky
blue.
blue.
And you see it just gives you a nice contrast. And on the, darker contrast. And you want to apply this one kind of in between the rows that you did with the sky blue. Doesn't have to be exact. You're just filling in spaces wherever you want to. And if the mask is wet, like from where the star is, you can see how that impacts it makes it bleed already. Oops, and I just did the wrong dye. That also is not the end of the world. If you do the wrong dye, it's okay. You're using that blue somewhere in there anyways, and you can probably paint over it with the darker dye and it'll be just fine. Anyways, you get the general idea of how to add those blue sections in, the darker blue. So the next part, while you're working on that, I'm going to show you what I want you to do next. You're going to do that same indigo dye. And again, refer to the picture for the direction that your dashes should take. But you're just going to do dashes, leaving space in between. Do dashes of that indigo dye on the upper section of your hills. And please notice that your hill section continues to the left of the cypress trees as well. So you want to make sure you put some of that indigo dye, leaving white spaces in between, so that you can add in the other blue. And then on the lower section, you're going to add in the sky blue dashes. You're going to do dashes of sky blue in that lower section. And again, you can refer to the picture at the top of your sheet for the direction those dashes should be going. They're kind of slanted there. So you just want to fill it in, and I'm going to show you, it should look something like this at the bottom when you're finished. So you'll fill in your swirls and the 2 rows of hills, both on the left and the right. There's the right side as well the left side as well for the sky blue down here. We'll move back to the red poppy while y'all are working on that. All right. I think I'm ready to shift over, B. All right, how are we coming on our red poppy? Hopefully you've had time to get that entire exterior painted.
With blue.
With blue. And let me trade masks. We are gonna do our red dye, your one that says red dye. We're gonna do that first. And
So, Amy, when they were doing the sky, if it bleeds through the line, that's okay, right?
yes,
Because
you
you're
can see
coloring.
on mine, look how that bled through. No, don't panic about that. Your red is going to cover that. And actually, Vishal, that's a great point. When you use your red and your orange dye, we're pretty much going to do a border all the way around of the 2 darker colors to cover that blue. So we're going to take our darker red dye and make sure you stir each time before you want to be sure you get your dye mixed up. And then I kind of referred to the picture, and you can see in step 3, I've showed you kind of where I think the darker shades of the poppy are. You don't have to choose to do it the way I painted it. That's just how I thought it looked. And so, use your artistic license. You paint the darkest sections where you think they are looking at that picture, or where you think they should be. And we're just going to kind of fill in, leave room for your medium, your orange and your light orange dyes to go in there, but just kind of fill in around the center section. And again, you don't want to get right up against the edge with a full brush of dye. Because it'll bleed right on into the other sections, and you don't want that to happen. If you are choosing to use your cotton swab, you are welcome to do that on this. If you're more comfortable with that, I'll show you how that will get rid of this blue dye right here. And again, you see how that bleeds? When you use the cotton swabs, it does tend to bleed more than if you're using the other, but you can see how that covers the blue. And don't panic when you see those red dots, because when you rinse it, those red dots are going to disappear. They're going to go away. It blends in. I can show you. This is one that I did using the dots, and you can see you don't see any dots when you run the water through it and the dye set, it just disappears. So you just kind of decide where you think your red dye should be. I do want you to notice there's a few places up on the right side that you definitely want to go ahead and put those spots in, just to give you a little bit of contrast, because a lot of that right side is the lighter colors. So you kind of just want to draw in a few. You can do that with your brush or with your Q-tip, again, entirely up to you. I'll paint some with both so you can see kind of how that would work.
And O'Keeffe painted this painting. She was about 2 years away from discovering her love of the Southwest. But you can see a lot of the elements that she put into her more famous paintings that she did about the Southwest. One of the concepts that she really liked to work with is she wanted the viewer to really see what she was painting. We look at flowers all the time, and they're beautiful and we enjoy them, but we don't really look at them with our full attention, and that's what she's calling on us to do. do that, she paints the painting at about a 45-degree angle, and it causes you to have to slow down because you're not looking at it dead on. You have to slow down and really study the flower and see the structure of it. And that's what she's trying to do with this painting, cause you to put on the brakes and really think about the flower and the blending of the colors in it.
Does anybody have any questions? Christy, have we gotten any questions? Dry. Yes, dry, definitely. That is different. I bet that's somebody who came to our tie-dye program. This is a little different. Yes, on this we are painting dry. And I will tell you, and this goes for the Starry Night as well. I'll show you. This is what one-time painting looks like when it dries a lot of times. This is the one I did that was just one time. And so what I did was the next day I went back and let's see. Oh, I have a little friend. Look, we have a ladybug visitor on our we've got a ladybug that's joined us tonight. See, this is one that I did 2 times. So I like to go back the next day and add in the color again because it is the ink as you just heard us talking about the tie-dye. These are inks that are used for things like tie-dye. And so it is not going to stay this dark, vibrant color that it currently is. Hopefully, yours will not be washed in hot water. It'll look more like that when you're done than like this where I washed it in hot water. But if you keep your inks, you can always go back and re-ink it again. Vishal's got one on that that has he shows our bleed effect. He's got the bleed effect one on. But anyways, these are, I highly recommend before you wash it, take a picture of yourself wearing it or a picture of it completed while it looks 100% its best self and before it fades out a little. But it's dye that's used for tie-dye, so it is gonna fade. So I am going to leave you guys working on your dark red, and you just keep painting and adding in. You can refer to that step 3 picture to kind of see where I put those. And then if you get finished with that before I make it back over to you, we're going to be moving on to your orange dye. And you can see kind of in that picture in step 4 where we filled that orange dye in relation to the red dye. Do be sure to leave some room for your lighter orange dye. So don't fill everything in with your orange and your red dye. But I want to point out, if you're looking at that, there are not very many areas that I left in that step 4 picture that there wasn't either a dark orange on the edge or a red on the edge because of that blue dye. Your yellow dye, your light orange dye will cover the blue, just not as well as the orange and the red. So for the most part, you could even go all the way around with your light orange or your red and just kind of tap in a little border to help cover up that blue that bled over. Don't do your light orange dye until I come back because there are some mistakes that can mess up your mask with that one. So don't do that until we get back, but you can work on your red and your orange dyes while we're working on Starry Night. And so we will hop back over to Starry Night. I just want to point out that Luana left me. Luana put all of our instruction packets together and she made sure to remind me to please read all instructions before I began tonight. hopefully you had time to go through all of your instructions as well. And we should be up to the painting the cypress tree using the black dye on step 5. And I am going to recommend using your Q-tip on painting this particular part. It gets the dye on there in a thicker manner than if you use the brush. The only thing you have to be careful of is the bleed. You don't want it to bleed outside of those narrow lines. So be careful where you add that in. I try to do my first dot somewhere towards the center. And you can always come back and touch up those smaller areas with the paintbrush. Lee, what were you telling us about these trees?
Well, cypress, has the connotation of being a tree associated with cemeteries.
Oh,
And
I did not know that either.
yeah, there's a folk belief about burying people around cypress trees, and I think it comes from some some references in the Old Testament to cypress trees. But while he may have been thinking about eternity and life and death as he painted this, I don't doubt he was, he really tended to make choices about what he put in the paintings just based on their shapes. He was looking for a certain symmetry that he's doing in there. Now, this painting came from a really prolific time in his painting career. He, if you're familiar with his painting Irises, it was also done at this time, and the self-portrait that's so famous also came from this time. So he was very busy painting while he was recuperating in the hospital.
And it probably is safer to use your brush on that top part. You may be more exact with a cotton swab than I am, but it's probably safer to use your brush on that top part. And you can see it's going to bleed over a little, and that's okay. That's part of what makes it all blend together. For those of you who didn't know, in a previous life, Lee holds a doctorate and was a college professor. Lee, did you teach? One of the things you taught was art history, right? Or art appreciation? Art appreciation. So we are fortunate to have her here to share some of that information with us tonight. It sure does make it more interesting for me. Hopefully you'll feel like you've learned a little bit tonight with us too, not just had fun. I hope you're having fun. And let's see. And for those of you who've already finished your swirl and you're working on this, you've already done the hardest part. That is the hardest part of this mask. Y'all send Christy a message if I'm going too fast. It's hard for me to tell. In case you can't tell from that table behind me, I've painted these masks a few times. So I might be going a little faster than you need me to. So don't hesitate to send Christy a message if you need me to slow down. We have time tonight.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
We know a lot about Van Gogh's painting and what he was thinking about during this time because he wrote a lot of letters. Predominantly he wrote to his brother Theo, and so we have their letters. And it's a great wealth of information about everything that he was thinking during this time, and even difference of opinion that he had with other artists. For example, he was involved in a sort of by-letter debate with the painter Seurat. He he's well connected to a lot of different members of the art community, and he wrote a lot of letters, which we have, which is just an amazing gift for art historians.
And that's another thing we did include in your packet, a book list of some titles that had, I think it's the resource list. It has a bunch of different books that our library has here that you are welcome to reserve that give you more information about these two artists, and just about, some of them are just about the world's great paintings, period. I do want you to see that I like to make those cypress trees very dark because that tends to fade out and you want this part of your painting to pop. So I definitely tend to go over that and add back in a little more. Once you can see where you end up with a little bit of a white spot there, you want to just go fill that in. So
You can make that like a 3D picture so it pops out, right?
yes, yes. That's our 3D cypress tree, baby. So once you finished your cypress tree, if you look at the painting, you'll see there's a very thin layer of yellow and kind of light blue dashes. We're going to put the yellow ones in right now above your top layer that was drawn in. You're just going to kind of follow that line and do a row or two of yellow dashes. So you're going to just kind of do some lines. Again, you can see the direction the dashes are going from your picture, and I just want to, I don't think I got all of the black dye off of my brush. Let's try that again.
They're coming on the opposite of the hill.
Yeah, they're kind of, they're going left to the right, kind of. And you'll see I am not exact. I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist at all. I'm a crafter. So my things are rarely exact.
You're still doing a good job.
Oh, thanks, B. This has been a really fun program to plan for you guys. And I have to say, I feel fortunate to work with so many creative and crafty people who don't hesitate to share great ideas. It's fun to make these things happen. And we really hope that we have given you the opportunity to do something fun and relax a little and just join us for a fun evening. It's fun for us to get to hang out too, even if we can't hang out in the building together. And again, make sure that you come across to that left side with your yellow dashes. You want to be sure you're on that left side so that it gets continued across. That is probably not the neatest example, but you can see how the yellow and the black kind of go across there. So let's see. I think I'll change to this one because that one's wet. If you chose to just do yellow stars, this is what that's going to look like. If you chose not to add any orange and you're not going to add the orange dot later, that's what that's going to look like. So while that area is drying that you just painted the yellow dashes in, and while the cypress tree is drying, we'll move on to step 7, and we're going to use your indigo dye. And you're just going to kind of paint in all the areas that are left. You're going to paint dashes of indigo dye, and it should look something like this when you're done, if that gives you any idea of what we're kind of going for. we're just filling in with that darker indigo dye. And again, refer to your picture for the direction that the dashes are going, because you'll see there's a lot of motion in this painting. Like when you're painting around the moon, when you're painting around this area, it looks like the blue indigo dashes are circling the moon. So you want to, follow that pattern, however it is in the picture. So I am going to leave you guys working on and I will tell you with this, I did do bigger blobs. I call them blobs of the indigo dye, because you're wanting this part of your sky to be darker. So I did do kind of blobs. Oh, I just did the wrong color. Huh? Not the end of the world. I do blobs of color for this as well, because you want it to, you're gonna want this part of the sky to be darker. Be very careful when you go in between like these two stars here. Very careful, because if your blue ends up in the yellow, it will be green. V, can you show them your mask? Is it possible for you to show them your mask?
Let's see.
V very kindly took the mask that I did that in. You can see how it bled into the green. So you do want to be careful. I will say that I was very disappointed when I did that, because that was the very last step that I had gotten to, and his mask was looking really good up to that point. But again, when you get to the moon, the moon, make sure your dashes are kind of circling that moon. Christy, these dyes are great. Christy spent hours putting these dye cups together for everybody. And this is just a great color. It's working very well. Okay, so I'm going to leave you guys working on your dashes, and you're putting them in all the areas around the stars, around the swirls. Don't put any in that area where you just did the yellow dashes. So stop right above those yellow dashes, but fill in everywhere else. And you can also put these dashes, if you're bored and you finish in time, you can go ahead and put dashes of this indigo on your ear bands as well. That's a later step, but if you get through this part and we're not back to you yet, you can go ahead and do that. All right, we'll head back over to our red poppy people. All right, so hopefully you have had time to get your red and orange sections painted. If you haven't, will you let Christy know that I need to slow down? Oh, look, my little friend is gonna, look, our little friend, our ladybug friend is gonna be right here with us. Georgia, I love it. That's appropriate. Our ladybug is Georgia. So with this light orange dye.
Let's slow down a little.
Okay, all right, I will slow down. Lee, you want to tell us something else fun?
And so it was a tough time for her, and she was working through that, and she after during this time she started traveling a bit to help herself feel better. She had previously been living in Manhattan, and a lot of her early paintings involved skyscrapers and things like that. So then she went to New Mexico visiting out there, and was recuperating, and she visited a place in New Mexico called the Ghost Ranch, and absolutely fell in love with it. And so over the course of the next couple of years, transferred her life to the Ghost Ranch and lived there until she, she died in her 90s. And that just changing that environment, you know, out there in the area around Taos, it completely changed her art and kind of gave her a new beginning, if you will. She went from painting, like I said, very detailed, um, uh, views of things like the red poppy to painting the beautiful landscapes and cliffs out there in New Mexico. Uh, but she always worked within that same sort of color palette. She really likes those earth tones.
Me too. They're pretty. Um, I'm going to go ahead and start with the light orange dye. And this is the one I want to give you a caution about. So for some reason, this light orange dye bleeds much easier than the darker red and orange. So be very careful when you are anywhere close to the edge of your flower, because this dye will bleed out into your blue, and it kind of gives it, I don't know, not even a green. I'm trying to think where you can see it on this one. It gives it kind of a greenish tint instead of a blue. It's not the end of the world, but it's, if you can avoid it, try to put your first dab in closer instead of at the edge. So again, stir it up to make sure that your dye is mixed completely. And then you're just gonna,
I think we had a question. Did we have a question? No? Okay.
now another thing that I like to do with this light orange dye is I like to paint over. I don't know if you can see, I'm painting over. We
Yes.
are on step 5. Yes. I like to paint over the darker orange and red sections with that light orange. It just kind of adds a little, it blends it a little better, in my opinion. These look a little disjointed, but as you can see, I did kind of go all the way around the edges. If you're painting your edges, I went all the way around the edges with my orange and my red to kind of counteract that blue bleed. And I do end up going back and adding more of the light orange after it dries, just because it is a lighter color and that blue has bled through enough that you will probably want to put a little more of your light orange color on there. Layering those colors really does help cover up some of the bleed. I'm just gonna keep painting in here. I also want to say thank you, and I hope you all will, if you see her, say thank you to Pam, who is the head of our circulation department. Yeah, she is the one who she greenlights all the programs we get to do and helps us find the funding. And I also want to thank our director, Amanda, for letting us do these fun programs. It's a great supportive environment. And again, we hope you're having a fun time tonight painting with us, and that you'll end up with a masterpiece mask that you're happy with at the end of this program.
Another place where Georgia O'Keeffe was a cutting edge type person is in estate planning. Because as she got older in the 70s, she hired an assistant to help her with taking care of the ranch, staying on top of her business affairs, painting, moving things around for her. And as time went on, this assistant actually did more of the physical caretaking for her. She lived to be 94, and she got kind of frail at the end. And when she passed away in the 80s, it turned out that there were codicils to her will that left most of her estate to her assistant, and her family contested the will. They ended up settling out of court and working it out, but because of this, estate planning for famous artists became a thing.
I did not know that. Did he end up getting the ranch, Lee? Do we know?
I don't believe so. I think the ranch is now a museum, but he ended up with many millions of dollars.
He could buy his own ranch.
He can buy his own.
And you'll see, I just had a little bit where I put too
Right,
much. You can see it bleeding over. Again, not the end of the world, but you do kind of want to avoid that where you can. And if you decide that, some part of this part that you're painting light orange had too much blue and you just feel like it's not covering it, you are not bound by where I painted light orange. You can add in darker orange, or you can add in the red dye, whatever you would like. This is your flower. Great.
Make it your own.
That's right. Make it your own. We are big believers in that.
You can have it your way.
I have to show you. This is when we were coming up with different artists to paint. I don't know if you know Steve at the front desk. He donated one of his white T-shirts, and we cut it up and tried out many, many different paintings before we decided which ones looked best. But it has been an entertaining program to come up with, a fun one. Very fun. Glad my mom made her comment about our tie-dye program looking like Starry Night.
We got a hooray for Steve in the comments.
We did. Yeah, be sure to tell Steve next time you're in that you appreciate him sacrificing a T-shirt if you have fun at this program. I'm definitely getting a little bleed here on these edges, but you can counteract that by not doing what I'm doing. Don't load up your brush with the dye. Just do tiny swipes of dye. I'm kind of going fast, so I'm letting it bleed more than it really needs to, but let's see. I'm getting there, almost there. You may be ahead of me.
There's a dinosaur named for Georgia O'Keeffe because it was found not far from the quarry by the Ghost Ranch. It's a brachiosaur, and it was named Iphigenia O'Keeffe, which translates to O'Keeffe's ghost. And that was 2006. So apparently, when the dinosaurs were being discovered in the quarry, she was very interested in it, and so they ended up naming one of the species for her.
That's super cool. I love that we have a little ladybug friend here. Okay, so I am just about through with my lighter orange dye on this. And again, you can see that when it dried, it is lighter. And I personally would choose to go back the next day and after it's completely dry. Actually, you probably could do it if yours is dry. You could probably do it tonight. But once it's fully dry, because if you do it while it's still damp, it's going to bleed badly into the other sections. But once it's fully dry, I like to take my leftover dye and go back and add kind of a second coat. And then you're going to want to let your mask, when you're completely finished, just sit for 72 hours before you do the dye set, because you want it to really take to the mask. So I basically put in the parts that I'm going to paint this lighter orange. So I am going to change to working on the center. I'm moving to step 6 for those of you who are following along, and you're going to need your black dye. Let's see. And this part, it may be easier to use a cotton swab for parts of this. That's really up to you. You may be fine painting with the brush, but you may find that it's easier to dab this in with the cotton swab, or you may choose to use your brush. It's entirely up to you. You can do it either way. The cotton swab gives you a little more of the dotted effect, and the brush gives you more control over where it's going on some of those smaller areas. Let's see, just kind of filling in there. And then once I get the center, the area around that center section painted with the black dye, kind of like that. And I definitely go back and add a second coat on that because I like it to be darker than it ends up drying. For the center section, you can either take your Q-tip with black dye on it and then just barely press down in the center to have a circle. Or if you feel confident in your circle drawing skills with your paintbrush, I'm not confident, but I'm going to try. And make sure it's flat. And then just do in the center of that kind of a circle with the tip of your paintbrush to give you a circle in the center of your circle in the center there. And then I don't know if you can see in the picture in Georgia O'Keeffe's picture up there of the red poppy, the yellow part is kind of outlined in little loops. And so what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, if this is too much work, you don't feel like doing this, you're afraid you're going to mess it up, totally understand. You don't have to do this. But if you want to try, I like to round out the edges of the different petals with the black dye and then draw into the center. The little lines that go to the center. So you can just you're just tracing basically with your brush. And that part you can't do with your Q-tip. You will have to do this part with the brush if you choose to do it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just kind of giving some definition to the center of the flower. You don't have to be perfect about it. You see, just kind of give it some definition, make it look a little more like the center of a flower.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm gonna leave you guys painting on that and go back to our friends on the other side with the Starry Night. And we'll be back in just a little bit with the red puppy. Okay, so my Starry Night friends, hopefully you have been able to dot all of your indigo dashes in. And that was step 7, if you're keeping up with us. And now your yellow dye should have had time to dry enough that it won't bleed. And I want you to go and add in just a few along the bottom part of that section of yellow dashes along the top of the hills. So you're going to use your indigo dye and just a very few at the bottom. Add in a little bit of blue and try to make sure you're painting it where it is a white section. Don't paint over a yellow dash because then you end up with a green dash and it kind of gives you the neon effect. So you just add in just a few dashes of blue, not many at all. And that is going to be step 8 that you're working on. And once you've added in a handful, and I do mean a handful, like 10 to 15 indigo dashes in the bottom part of the yellow layer, then you're going to go to your navy blue dye. So you're going to pull your navy blue dye down. And we're going to go along this top section of hills that you originally put your indigo in, the top section of the hills that's drawn in for you. We're going to add in some dashes of navy there. And I will tell you the navy tends to bleed more for some reason than the indigo. And so I basically just fill in around the indigo dashes with the navy for that top section of the hills that's drawn in. So you're just going to paint in the top section with your navy. And again, it does, for whatever reason, that color tends to bleed a little more than the indigo does. But hopefully it's going to bleed right around. You're just kind of filling in all the sections that are white on that top section of the hill. I'm trying to fill them all in. And you'll see, if you can see on mine, it's okay if it goes over the indigo sections because the indigo is dark enough that it kind of holds its own and you can still see, I don't know, V, can you see there? Can you see how that the indigo dashes still show through even if you get that navy dye on top of them? I definitely did. And again, y'all shout out in the chat feature if you have questions or if we're going too fast or if something isn't working right, let us know. We'll do what we can to troubleshoot. Of course, we did say, I'll just talk about that while we're doing this. We did say that these dyes were left over from our tie-dye program. And this is just a fun way to do something other than tie-dye with you guys. And we already have the supplies. So we're having fun coming up with creative ways to reuse what's left over. Although I do think you'll see another tie-dye Thursday in the future. I don't know, we've had several other programs. We've had a couple of Book Smart programs that were watercolor. You might have attended some of those. We have some great things coming in the next year, things to look forward to. I know we're going to do an origami program. Christy, what else do we have? I can't think right now. Do you have anything else that you can think of that we know for sure? Watercolor postcard program in the summer.
Is that, yeah.
We've got a lot of other things that are in the planning stages. So be watching for that. Christy's putting together a mailing list. So if you've been to any of our programs, you'll get the opportunity to be on the emails to receive notification whenever we have a new class scheduled, so you can get registered. Christy, can they just click on a link in that email to register? Is that how you had it done? I know, but like the one that you sent out for this one, wasn't there just a link in the email that people who were interested could click on to register? For the event? Yes. So when there's an event.
One event that's coming up is next Wednesday night. There's an Agatha Christie celebration that we'll be hosting here at the library, and you can join via Zoom. That's Wednesday at 7.
I mean, if you know Stratton from our department, he's going to be a part of that program, isn't he? Okay, we're almost done with this part, hopefully. What are we doing on time? I'm doing all right.
Still good.
Okay, so I have added in my navy there. And then I want to take my indigo dye. And remember, we put sky blue dye on this lower level of the hills. Now I want to take my indigo dye. Unfortunately, the indigo dye does not bleed as badly as the navy dye. So I'm going to do dashes to fill in those white areas. And see, it does tend to, for whatever reason, you can see that it stays in the dash forms, which the navy did not do, but it works out well in the end anyways. So you're just going to fill in on this. And you do have to use a lot of dye on the band part to get it to hold that color. And it will be a slightly paler shade when you're finished than the cotton part of the mask, but it actually is very, I like the effect. It almost frames out what you've painted in the center. I have to say another shout out to Christy for finding this particular mask, because the one that I painted originally had little folds in it that made it extremely difficult to do some of these shapes. And she found these that were not pleated to any extreme. So that was wonderful. That was a big help in making these look as good as they do.
You know, Van Gogh wasn't appreciated as an artist in his short life. He never really sold anything while he was alive. His sister-in-law sold a few paintings immediately after he died, but he just never was accepted very much as a painter. In fact, one of the paintings he did during the period he did Starry Night was a portrait of one of his physicians, and the doctor didn't like the painting and gave it away. And in 2016, it sold for $50 million.
Woo-hoo.
We're just talking about money tonight, huh?
Woo.
Money.
Our masks are not going to sell for that much. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. And again, this is the same thing. I recommend coming back tomorrow and adding in a second layer to darken this up so that it looks more like that finished mask here. And actually, this is the pleated one. I bought these at Walgreens. You can see it has the pleats in it. That was not fun to paint around. So again, thank you to Christy for finding us ones that were actually flat to paint on. So we've done our dashes and we are ready for step 10. And so this is the part I'm going to leave you working on. You're going to go back to your navy blue dye. And this is where you're filling in all of the sections around your stars, your moon, and remember, be very careful not to get these around your swirls because you want that white area to stay around your swirls. And also don't forget to stir your paint. I am very careful with this navy because it does bleed. And I start out by trying to fill in the spots where I've painted the indigo that are close to the swirl. Just so that I don't forget where the swirl is, because that's happened in one of them that I painted. I forgot where the swirl was and I painted right over it. It was devastating. So I kind of tend to trace out that part first and then just fill in. And remember that navy does bleed. Doesn't have to be actual dashes. It can be blobs. It's just the general, go the general direction of the dashes in the painting. And when you get over to your moon, don't forget that's in a circle around the moon. Don't forget to circle your moon. Get that movement there. And again, be very cautious when you get down to this point where you've got your yellow hills. Be very cautious with your navy dye in that area. You'll see I give it a wide berth just to be sure that it doesn't bleed over into that yellow. And the same, you don't want it to bleed into your swirl, so kind of pay attention to where your swirl is. I do try to put a little bit of this, just a tiny bit in between the stars to delineate those two stars so you can clearly tell there's two stars there. So I'm going to leave you guys painting your navy and, make sure you get over on that left side as well in the part that's under the stars and above the hills. I'm going to leave you guys working on that and go back to our poppy. So good luck with your navy dashes, and we'll be back in just a tiny moment. Okay, so our poppy, we're very close to finished with our poppy. Oh, look, Georgia's up and moving. Georgia the ladybug. Georgia. So we are on step number 7 on the poppy. And you're going to take your green dye and let's see. You're going to fill in this stem section. And I realized I forgot one other thing that we're going to go back and do on the poppy after we finish filling in our green section. And your green is going to be very blue-green, but if you notice on the painting, it is a very blue-green green. So it's got these two little leaves up there. And my stem on this is an earlier version of the stem. We actually gave you guys a little more definition with the fabric markers than this one has. So yours will look a little more finished than mine because we mixed the black and the brown fabric markers for y'all.
There weren't many women who were painting impressionist paintings when O'Keeffe was doing this body of her work, and she did a series of red poppies. There are actually 7 different paintings of red poppies from this time period, And you can kind of look at it as a commentary. I mean, um, women are supposed to like flowers, and flowers are a symbol of femininity in art. Um, eh, but you can also kind of see this as a commentary on that, because while she's painting a traditionally female item, she's doing it in that impressionist style, which was considered a very masculine style at the time. So
I
kind of
love
a
it.
mixed bag there.
So now we're going to take our black dye again because I forgot this one section earlier. You see these two, they're kind of drawn in a little bit on both sides, they're kind of a brown black. Take your black ink and just trace over, your black dye, and just trace over that section to darken it up a little. Both sides, on the left and the right, you'll see a little section that's kind of drawn in with the brown and black fabric markers, and you just want to paint over that with your black dye just to darken it up a little more. Yours will look a little bit different than this because, again, I changed the markers that I was using. And you may want to go back and add a little more black into that center section now that you can kind of see where the white sections are still showing. You may want to go ahead and go back and add a little more into that section. So there's that, got that, and I'm just gonna go back and add just a little more in there. Okay, so that is, okay, what's our question? I really just redid, I did not redo like that yellow center section with the lines and all, because I felt like that would bleed. It does bleed too much. Let me see if I've got an example. Yeah, here you go. If you redo your center section, you lose your definition. So definitely don't redo the center section. You really, for me, it was more about trying to, I don't think I have my finished, I don't have the completely finished one. It's in your pictures though. I went back through and brushed. This is me. You don't have to do it. I had fun with this. When I went back, I added the red, orange, and light orange. Those were the three colors I mainly repainted. I did a little bit more black, not on the yellow part, but just on the darker sections that are supposed to be black. I did add a little more of that, but I took my orange dye and I did the first blob there, and then I flicked some random streaks through those lighter orange sections to blend it in a little more. I don't know if you can tell. I've done it on both the left and the right sides, the left and the right. I added a little more of the darker colors over that light orange section the second time through. I did not put as much light orange on in the second coat because, again, that bleeds. So I tended to stick more with the orange and the red. I just used a little bit of the yellow. That's good, Christy? Okay, awesome. Okay. So does anybody else have any questions about the red poppy? Once you've gone back and you've retouched that tomorrow, if you choose to, because again, if you don't, This is what it looks like with one coat, and it's still beautiful. So if you don't feel like painting it again, you still have a beautiful mask. Again, when you get ready to die set this, you'll see you have your die set instructions on the back sheet of your instructions. Let that mask dry for at least 72 hours. You can let it go longer, but let it dry for at least 72 hours. And then you're going to thoroughly rinse this mask. And I mean, rinse it until the dye stops running. Again, holding it like this with the faucet running straight through the center, you can dip it, you know, this way to get the blue ink sides, but let the blue ink run through the center. It won't hurt your red and oranges. Your red and oranges will turn your blue into a gray. So make sure you rinse it like that. And then when you are using your die set, you should have a cup of die set in there. It doesn't require a lot. You're going to put it in a bowl that you've already put. Yep, there you go. Vishal's showing you your die set. You put your hot water, 2 cups of hot tap water into a bowl, and then put your die set in. Do not put your die set in first because your die set can damage plastic. So make sure you've got your hot water in first and wear your gloves. And then once you've rinsed it in cool water, put it in that die set and let it sit for 20 minutes. And then after you've let it sit in the die set for 20 minutes, you're going to put it in a cold wash cycle in your washing machine. Do not use any soap. Please don't use soap. You'll ruin your masterpiece. So put it in your washing machine on a cold wash cycle, and then put it in the dryer, and your mask is ready to wear. So for those of you who've done the poppy, that's basically all of the instructions for that. Don't leave yet because there's a couple of things at the end that you're going to want to hear. And we only have a little bit more to Starry Night and we'll be done. So hang around for just another minute. And Starry Night, friends, if you are choosing to add a drop of, is this it? I think this is the one. If you're choosing to add a drop of orange to the center of your stars using a paintbrush, this is where we're going to do that. And again, you're adding the tiniest dot of orange. And I'm going to do this one right here because I messed it up. So you just barely make sure it's flat and just barely touch the tip of the orange brush too. I got actually a little bit too much there. I should have knocked that off. There's a better example. There you go. Just barely touching, and you can use one thing of dye should do all of your stars. One dip of the brush and the dye should do all of your stars. But there you go. That's your stars. And then you can finish out, if you haven't already, you just do the navy and indigo and sky blue around the edges of your mask. And then once your mask is completely dry, so you're not going to be able to do it right now. I can because I did this earlier today, but don't do this right now if your mask is at all damp because it will mess up all your hard work. You're going to take your sky blue dye and go back over these sections, not the swirls. And this is the part that you don't want to do around your stars. So don't get this near your stars, but fill in with the sky blue dye. And it's okay to paint over the navy and the indigo with this. So you just have your ear loops to finish, and you're just alternating all 3 of your blues on your ear loops, and then just filling in with this sky blue dye to make your night sky look like a night sky. Again, you don't want it to run too much. If you find it running, hold it where it runs down and blow. And so that's what you'll do. You'll fill in those sections that you had any little white areas left that were not part of the swirl and not part of your stars or your hills with that sky blue dye. And you can do the sky blue dye to the top and bottom layer of the hills as well. But be sure that it doesn't bleed over. You'll see, I just did a little bit there to show you. You'll see that it's bleeding over into the yellow. You want to be real careful with that sky blue dye so it doesn't bleed over into any area that has yellow. And so that is your final step on that. You'll find your die set instructions on the back of your instructions. And again, that is, you want to thoroughly rinse that mask in cold water to remove any excess dye. I don't have any particular instructions for you on being careful. I didn't have problems with this one. I did hold it like this so that the black dye ran down from the cypress trees instead of into my stars and the moon. But other than that, I don't think you have to worry about anything when you're rinsing it in cold water. And let's see. It's the same instructions. Soak that mask in the dye set solution for at least 20 minutes. Please make sure you wear gloves. Please make sure you put that hot water in the bowl first and then add your dye set. And then again, wash your mask by itself on a cold water wash setting. If you have more than one mask, if you're in a family and you have more than one mask, do not wash them together. I ruined 3 by washing them together, and they were all the same pattern, but the way it ended up in the washing machine, I didn't get there right as it ended. I was probably 5 minutes after it ended, and they were all wadded up in a ball, and the dyes ran from one mask to the other. So one mask at a time, and cold water, and then dry it on high heat, and you're good to go. And so that is all that I have on the masks themselves. If you have questions, put them in the chat box to Christy. And Lee, if you'll pop up slide number 4. You're welcome to take a picture of this slide. And it gives you our email address, hoovercirc@gmail.com. That's okay. When it pops up there, it'll have our email address on there. We would love to hear from you. We would love to see a picture of your mask. If you would like for it to be featured on social media, it has to be just the mask itself. And you can take a picture of it on a table or anything like that, a countertop. And also, we would love to hear your feedback. If you see something that can be improved, let us know. If you just had a great time and you want us to do more programs like this, let us know that too, because those go to our director and to our circulation coordinator, and they help determine what we're able to do. So definitely send us an email.
Question. I think we had a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Lee, I think that was slide number 2. And while Lee is putting that slide up, Vishal, do you want to talk about the second thing you were going to tell them about? You want to go ahead and tell them?
Sure.
Flip that camera around to you.
So after all the hard work that you have done on this mask, if your mask did not turn out the way that the masterpiece that you envisioned, don't worry. You can stop by the circulation desk in the next couple of weeks to fill out an entry to win one of the sample masks that Amy has made tonight. And we will draw the winners on December 21st, and we'll notify you guys, but it is all fine that if your mask did not turn out okay.
You still have a chance.
You still have a chance to, be a winner and pick out one of the masks that in the drawing. But yeah.
All right, Lee, you want to pop up slide number 6?
Or 5. Or you already
I'm
told
going to
them
skip
about
5 since we already told him about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, tell him about it.
So in addition to these wonderful art projects, we also have our own book club in the circulation department, Sunday Novelty. And our next book that we're reading for January is A Dream of Death. It's the first book in the Kate Hamilton mystery series. It's by Connie Berry. And Connie Berry is going to come to our Zoom meeting and tell us all about the book. And we have questions for her, and it's a lot of fun. We have great discussions of the books and great interviews with the authors. So we invite you to come along and enjoy a great murder mystery for this time of year. It's set in Scotland and the weather's terrible, and you can snuggle up with hot cocoa and read this book and be warm and snuggly and glad you're not out in the Scottish Highlands.
I love it. And then slide number 7, Vishal has something else to tell you guys about.
It's not another giveaway. Sorry, Amy. Well, technically it is. I think we're still loading up this slide, but our tic-tac-toe reading challenge is back, but with a holiday edition. You can take a picture of the slide right now or stop by the circulation desk to pick up your game card. And all you need to do to enter to win a gift card is to complete a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal line by reading the books, magazines, or watching the movies that fit the description in the boxes. So if you got a tic-tac, vertical, then all you need to do is send in the your name and put it in the drawing, and you get a chance to win a gift card.
And I think I forgot to put on there that the deadline for submissions is January 4th on that. So
Thank
sorry
you,
about
Amy.
that.
January 4th.
And
That's
if
the
you have
10th
any
day of Christmas.
questions about, you run into any issues with your masks, you can drop me a message at amy.harrell@hooverlibrary.org. Christy, will you put that in the chat for spelling? Christy will put that in the chat function. And then if you run into any problems, I'm happy to try to troubleshoot for you. If you want to just drop me a message, you're welcome to. And I hope that you've had a great time with us tonight. We certainly have had fun putting this program together for you.
I want to say something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So since Amy is a pro now at this, so she's requesting your questions, but I want to thank Amy for doing all these masks that you got in your kits, outlining all those masks, all 60 of them. I believe that's how many kits that we made. So she outlined all those masks for you guys, so you can do the easy part. Yes, exactly. She did, most of the hard part where she had to outline these masks. So command Amy on that things, because she's a pro.
Thank you, V. I appreciate that.
You're a master at this.
I'm a master at masks. Well, we've definitely had a great time putting this together for you, and I hope you'll keep an eye out for more great programs that we have planned coming up next year, and join us for some other fun. And again, if you have any questions, let us know, and have a great rest of your night.